Our first speaker this morning is founder and president of the Harris Project. She received her Juris Doctor from New York University School of Law in 1989. Her fighting spirit has led her to take a unique, proactive, and transformational approach to the overdose and suicide epidemics gripping our nation. She co-chairs the Westchester County Department of Community Mental Health's Co-occurring System of Care Committee. Her ambition is broad but straightforward: save lives and improve outcomes. Please welcome to the stage for her talk, You Don't Know the Half of It, Stephanie Marquesano.
Thank you. My journey landed me on the cover of the New York Times Sunday Review this past summer. My journey brought me to the White House 3 times since August. My journey led to my appointment on the New York State Opioid Settlement Fund Advisory Board. My journey started at my kitchen table the day my son Harris died by accidental overdose. When a 19-year-old dies in a small suburban community, everyone wants to know where they can make donations and what they can do to support you and your family. In the chaos of my household, it was completely clear. Each and every substance use rehabilitation program said my son had this thing called co-occurring disorders, and each one said they treated it. What I needed to figure out was how within a year and a half of entering that first program, my son was dead. I'm an attorney by training, former PTA president and school board member. If this happened in my house to my family, it had to be happening other places. But first, I get to bring in my tour guide, Harris. When I think of Harris, I think of a creative, loving, kind, humorous, athletic, and caring kid, a twinkle in his eye and a smile that would light up the room. Each and every one of you knows a Harris. Harris is the kid in the cafeteria where all the energy and excitement is. Things are flying and everybody's laughing, and sometimes they're getting into trouble. But you didn't know Harris well. You didn't know that that energy and excitement was often the only way that he could cope with how he was feeling on the inside. It might have taken him an hour to leave the house in the morning, and he was all league and all section in soccer, but if he had an away soccer game, that was an awful day for him. All he kept thinking about was what it was going to feel like to get on that away bus, and he would take all of his emotions and he would push them out into the world. But he was also the best friend you could have. He was there for so many people. And so for my family and his friend group, that gaping hole almost 10 years later is just as big, if not bigger, as it was on October 23rd, 2013. So what is co-occurring disorders? The combination of one or more mental health challenges and substance misuse and addiction. According to the National Survey for Drug Use and Health, 17.9 million people in this country have co-occurring disorders. When I started the Harris Project at my kitchen table, I started the only nonprofit in the nation dedicated to co-occurring disorders. We are still the only ones sitting squarely in this space. Our goals? Prevention opportunities, enhanced treatment protocols, transform the system of care. Sounds simple, huh? You don't know the half of it. So 22% of our youth 13 to 18 have a diagnosable mental health disorder in a given year with severe impact. That means between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 of our young people are truly walking around not feeling comfortable in their own skin. 50% of mental health disorders arise by 14, 75% by 24. What does that tell us? Mental health disorders, disorders of the young. But for what I focus on, what goes on between 14 and 24? A lot of young people, their family, their loved ones, they think experimentation is a rite of passage, not understanding the inextricable link between mental health and substance use. Almost half of the kids 8 to 15 who need services don't get them for their mental health. Could you imagine finding out you have a peanut allergy and them saying, you don't need to carry the EpiPen. You wait for that first anaphylactic reaction, and then we'll give it to you. That's what we tend to do with mental health in this country. We know things are simmering and things are going on, but we kind of wait until there's a crisis, and then we all react, which is why most people with co-occurring disorders have an emerging or an existing mental health disorder. Things like anxiety, ADHD, bipolar disorder, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. Using substances not to party, but to go to the party feeling comfortable in their own skin, self-medication, relieving stress and pressure, not understanding the connection. Then you have people who have a true predisposition, substance use disorder, mental health disorder, they're co-occurring. I'm sure most of you know somebody who's 25 and under for the last category. So you know how we say your brain isn't fully developed until you're 25? So that's a real thing. There are chemicals in there. You can't see, touch, taste, feel, or smell them, but they're there. Neurons are firing, receptors are connecting. Each and every time a young person uses nicotine, marijuana, smoking, vaping, edibles, alcohol, prescription medications like opioids, illicit substances, they run the risk of changing their brain chemistry and developing co-occurring disorders and a mental health disorder, even if they weren't on track to. And then there's genetics and family history and trauma. How do we break intergenerational cycles if we're not educating and empowering on what this even is? So Harris was 3 years old when he was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. He picked up the ADHD diagnosis in 8th grade. We were the lucky ones. He was getting mental health services. But guess what? Not one professional ever said, Harris, good-looking, popular, social kid like you, but so much anxiety. You better be really careful around substances. That could be a spiral you go down really quickly. That could have been the first and best opportunity for things to be different. Instead, 8th grade came. I was on the school board. Harris had stopped playing soccer. My husband and I watched his behaviors over the year become more and more unpredictable. We were really concerned about his mental health and well-being. In my community, most people thought Harris is just trying to get away with stuff because she's on the school board. There's nothing wrong with him. Well, the end of the year, probably like April, May came and things were really bad. We pulled him out of school and homeschooled him for the end of 8th grade. I resigned from the school board. We went to what would be the last session with his therapist, who said, Harris has become more than I can manage. I'm discharging him from care. And by the way, he's been smoking marijuana. I thought he was just experimenting, but I think he might have a problem. Youth, anxiety, marijuana, psychosis. Did he not know the half of it? So here we are with Harris at home. He's really committed to going to our local high school. We have him assessed. He sees a new psychologist. He picks up the ADHD diagnosis. He sees a psychiatrist, goes on medication for the first time. He starts doing really well. He's back playing soccer. He's on the student council. He's all league in all section. He's doing so well that he's like, the medication is working. I have so much going on. I don't need to see the therapist anymore. I'm good. And we're like, you're good. It started feeling like it was in the rearview mirror. We went to what would be the last session with that therapist who discharged him from care without a word about how, be careful around substances. Your brain is always changing. You might hit a bump in the road. I want you to know I'm always here for you. There was a disconnect completely. So 11th grade came. ACTs, SATs, stress and pressure. Am I playing soccer in college? The anxiety came back. It overwhelmed the medication. Went to a party in my town. Prescription pills were on the table. Took the pill. And that's when I could say for our family, the game was over. Within the year and a half before he died, 4 substance use inpatient treatment programs, 2 outpatient substance use treatment programs, each saying that Harris had co-occurring disorders and they treated it. For the most part, he would walk in, they would take away all the substances, even the ones he was prescribed for his mental health. They would put him in a group, not based on what brought him to use, but just when he walked through the door. He could fix you, he could talk about you, he could make a face at you, he would do anything but talk about himself. He would say, when am I going to get help for my mental health? They keep saying, remember, like before substances, I love my family, my friends, my house, my clothes. My brain works 1,000,000 miles an hour. If nothing changes, how am I going to get better? Blaming, shaming, finger pointing, the revolving door around and around and around until my son was dead. Did they not know the half of it either? So Harris died on a Wednesday. His funeral was on Sunday. Between Wednesday and Sunday, I decided I was going to launch this thing called the Harris Project. Friday morning came, and I was going to stay and write my eulogy. This was the morning I was going to do it. My daughter, who was a senior in high school, was in shock. The seniors in my high school community, they read to the kindergartners on the last Friday of October. She said, "Can I go to Read to Me Day?" And we're like, "Sure, go." My husband, in his infinite wisdom, said, "You're writing. I'm going to go out and get soda." I was home alone way too soon. I was in my bedroom hysterically crying. I have 2 rescue dogs. They were howling. I have never in my life asked for a sign, and something in that moment compelled me. I looked up at my ceiling, and I said, "Harris, I have no idea what I'm doing. Am I on the right track? I need a sign." And just like that, I walked across my bedroom floor. I have a dresser, a TV, and a junk drawer. I opened the junk drawer, and there were stacked marble notebooks from a program Harris had been in New York. He died out of a program in Florida. I opened up the top one, and just like in a movie, a piece of paper blew out, and it was a poem that Harris wrote to me. What I can't tell you is whether I ever heard the poem before, because you think when you visit your child in a substance use rehabilitation program, you're going to be so into the moment. Truth be told, I would walk in scared or angry or crying, but when I read his words in that moment, I thought, there is no other disease or disorder that would make a young person feel this way, and if I can impact one life, then this is what I'm going to do. Mommy, the things you provided, I took and I took. With greed and selfish tendency, I took and I took. When you warned me of danger, I gave you my back. So then you showed me and gave my life a second chance to retrack. When I stayed up all night, it was your hand on my hand. With a maternal embrace, you gave me the power to live on and wake up, head and body held high. Then I strayed and I strayed until you almost lost sight. But you never gave up. No, you showed more care than ever before. So now I cry and I cry, but my head's remaining high. No substance besides you can ever be used to comfort this very fragile, but very loving, yet self-absorbed soul. I love you, Mom, and if I could take all your pain, I would say my dreams have come true, because the worst that I've done is hurting you. So that's my why. This is yours. Overdose, suicide, alcohol-related deaths. More than 262,000 people in 2021. We silo causes of death in this country. The majority of these individuals had co-occurring disorders, and they and their loved ones probably had no idea. Co-occurring disorders, the largest public health crisis that no one is talking about. Opioids, heroin, fentanyl, now xylazine. We chase the supply, but we don't spend enough time on why the demand is so incredibly high. So me, the mom, at the kitchen table began to follow the breadcrumbs. And they led me to the Westchester County Department of Community Mental Health, where there was a deputy commissioner who's now the commissioner, who sat with me and we wrote 2 things on a piece of paper: youth engagement and move the mountain on treatment and the system. Well, as a former PTA president and school board member, I thought prevention could be a really fun place to start. And CODA started, Co-Occurring Disorders Awareness. Our logo, because of a poem that Harris wrote to my daughter, my little star ever glowing. He's the big star, she's the little star. But I remember going into an administrator very early on, and he said, "Stephanie, where's the evidence?" And that's when the lawyer in me kicked in. I found a study that said the time between the onset of a mental health disorder and the development of a subsequent substance use disorder is an important window of opportunity where co-occurring disorders can be prevented. That was good enough for him. But you see that, how I talk. Well, I came in and it was a pretty comprehensive presentation. And then they said, the kids aren't going to be interested. They have the attention span of a goldfish, 8 or 9 seconds. Guess what? That's a myth. Goldfish have 5-month attention spans. And guess what else? When you're giving young people tools to understand what is happening to them and their peers and their communities and even their parents, they take the mantle and run with it. Awareness games, youth summits, social emotional learning tools, activities, all promoting this connection. Because knowledge is power. You can't prevent something you've never heard of. But guess what? You educate your consumers, and there starts to become a demand. So now systems transformation and treatment needs to come front and center. So we were going to sit, and we had a round table, our invitations were out, and I followed the breadcrumbs and was led to Dr. Ken Minkoff, international systems change expert for co-occurring disorders. I write the way I speak. I vomited all my information out for him, and he said, Stephanie, can you call me now? He said, so I have good news for you, and I have bad news for you. The good news is you don't have to write the treatment protocol. It's already been written by the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. I said, okay, what's the bad news? It was written in 2005, and if people were using it, young people like Harris would still be alive. The lawyer in me needed to figure out what was going on, and what was going on was the federal government writes the gold standard treatment protocol, which they updated in 2020. Every state in this country decides what it does with its mental health and substance use dollars. Even if they live under the same roof, they are siloed, as you all well know. Well, he said, if you choose to accept the mission, you can change the system of care for everyone. And that is exactly what we started in Westchester, across the Mid-Hudson region of New York, now across New York State opioid settlement dollars. Every single RFP that goes out, co-occurring disorders and equity must be demonstrated. Change happens when you collaborate with incredible people, some of whom are in this room right now. But that was only the next piece of it. Clinicians, if Harris was sitting in front of you, would you know what to do? Were you trained in this? How will this happen? So when Harris was in the rehabilitation program, he got sequential treatment. We're gonna treat your substances. When you get out, you're gonna go deal with your mental health, not gold standard. Then it was simultaneous treatment, because when he got out, I took him to the 12-step meeting, the IOP, the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the gym, recurrence and use, under 2 weeks. Integrated treatment, the gold standard. The less places an individual who's complicated needs to go, the more successful they're going to be. Oh, there we go. So we found our way to Encompass during the pandemic. Dr. Paula Riggs out of the University of Colorado developed a once-a-week integrated treatment protocol. Once a week. Clinical consultation meetings. One of the first cases presented, a 25-year-old woman with bipolar disorder, homeless, unemployed, drinking a pint of vodka a day, smoking marijuana, and needs gastric bypass surgery. She is in a hospital. Dr. Riggs says, she sounds motivated for the gastric bypass surgery. I say we give Encompass a shot. Guess what? She needed 3 months of abstinence to have the surgery, had the surgery, became a contact tracer for the county, moved in with a relative, and when she was done with Encompass, she continued with her therapist so that she could keep her bipolar disorder in check, and if there was any concerns about recurrence and use, she stayed connected to care. Craft was the next thing up for the family, and I'm sure that I've exhausted you by now. So what I'm going to leave you with is this. Now that you know the half of it, are you ready to make some positive impact? Thank you.
Stephanie Marquesano.